What's your most accidental baddest moment? Me and my then 3-year-old son went to the playground. This bigger kid arrived and started going around scaring the crap out of the littler kids by popping out and roaring and hissing and whatnot right in their face. I saw what car came in and that his mom was sitting in it still, maybe just waiting for him to finish playing. Anyway, he proceeds to do his scare thing to my son, who of course freaks out and runs to me crying. I started fuming, thinking it is his own parents' responsibility to tell him to cut that shit out. I decided to go tell his mom. I ask, "Is that your son over there?" She says yes, and I tell her what he's doing and either you get him to stop or I'll do it for you. To my surprise she says, "Oh please do, I can't control him today." So I go back over and try my best to hide right near where he is roaming. And as soon as he's within striking distance I pop out, and with all the air in my lungs I scream at the top of my lungs 1 inch from his faking face. He ran back to his car absolutely terrified and crying. I could see his mom. She didn't come out or do a thing. To this day, if anyone messes with my son who's bigger than him, he screams nonsensically in their face. Was in a restaurant with my girlfriend at the time when a guy built like a refrigerator just comes barging through and knocks my girlfriend's drink all over her. It was clearly an accident based on his refrigerator-like physique and being unable to hold his arms at his side. At this point I'm standing up to help clean her up and figure he's going to apologize or something. Instead he pushes my shoulder and tells me to get out of the way and let the beach clean herself up. I stare at him and say, "That beach is my girlfriend. You damn well better apologize to her." So the woman and man at the table next to us are notably getting nervous. She drops her menu off the table. By some fluke I catch the menu flat along the top of my foot before it hits the ground and proceed to just raise my foot, keeping the menu on top of it. I grab the menu into my hand, all the while glaring into this guy's eyes. I just tell her, "Sorry ma'am, you seem to have dropped this." I just look at him and say, "So, I think we left it off where you were going to apologize to my girlfriend for being so rude and then walking around." Much to my surprise, he turned to my girlfriend and said, "I'm terribly sorry," and then turned around and walked away. Our check was taken care of as well. I've caught light things like pieces of paper on top of my foot, but never something like a menu, and I was always terrible at hacky sack. I worked at a Boy Scout camp years and years ago. One of the activities I was in charge of was building a log cabin. Part of building the log cabin is to strip all the bark off the wood to help keep the logs from rotting. The scouts generally had a love-hate relationship with this step of the project. On the plus side they got to use sharp objects. On the minus side it was hard manual labor. While they were using bark strippers, I was using a chisel to get the bark off around knots. Normally using a chisel on wood is not a hazardous operation, as long as the blade is facing away from you. One day I was not doing well on my safety observance. I was trying to jam a stubborn piece of bark off the wood with the blade facing toward my arm. The wood broke against the force. The blade kept on trucking through the bark and into my wrist. At this point the scouts knew something was wrong as they saw me curse, drop the chisel, and grab my arm. I was the only adult present, so I was fighting to keep my calm as to not panic the scouts. My solution was to turn it into a first aid lesson. I told a couple of scouts to get the first aid kit and the others to help me over the picnic bench. I told them they were going to have an impromptu first aid lesson on severe bleeding and shock with the victim as their instructor. The scouts were able to keep their heads together and get the health officer out to our location to treat me the rest of the way. They said it was the best first aid class they had ever had. At the end of the high school year in gym class, when it was too hot to do anything outside, the bleachers would be out in the gym and 95% of people would sit on them, while the 5% who wanted to do something would be shooting some hoops waiting for the period to be over. I was in that 5%, but there was a, not literally, retarded kid who would always try to run up and steal the basketball and throw it all the way across the gym. If he ever touched the ball, you would have to go 200 feet to get it back. If he didn't steal it from you the first time, he would tackle people to the ground and then get it and throw it. Huge douche. He was strolling towards me one day, and I knew what he was planning. So when he was about 10 feet from me, I just sprinted down the court towards the other side of the gym with my ball in hand, and he took chase. About halfway down the court, where everyone was sitting on the bleachers, I decide to ditch the ball, so I can run faster, and not get tackled from behind by a pretty meaty dude. I threw the ball basically straight up as I was running, and by some freak of luck he did not see the ball coming down, and it blasted him exactly on his face, and he fell on his ass, and was rolling around confused for a while everyone laughed at him. After I saw what happened, I ran to the top end of the bleachers, because I figured it would be safer if he couldn't find me, but right after he got up he spotted me, and stormed up the bleachers like he was going to beat the shit out of me. He got up in my face trying to start a fight, but I didn't want to do anything due to my school's very strict no fighting policy, so I just held my hands up politely like, what do you want me to do? After about a minute of him screaming at me, and everyone watching intently, he decides he wants to shove me, but he somehow didn't realize that I was sitting against a wall, and would therefore not move very much. He tried to push me, but instead he just flung his own body down the bleacher stairs, and slid all the way to the bottom. He ended up getting suspended for fighting, and all I got was props from the entire class. TLDR, got a bully to run face first into a basketball, and then fling himself down a flight of stairs. Edit. He was not actually retarded. He was just a jerk. He was in app English with me but none of the other app classes. I catch rattlesnakes for a living in Phoenix, Arizona as an emergency response service for people who find a snake in their yard, etc. Most calls are diamondbacks, but 1 in 4 are, so rattlesnakes end up being a large constrictor called a gopher snake. Gopher snakes can be aggressive, but they are otherwise harmless. On one call, there was a kid of about 15 who was absolutely terrified of a rattlesnake he saw along the back wall of his yard, behind the swimming pool. The only way to really get there was to tightrope it across the narrow ledge of the pool. I got there and saw that it wasn't a rattlesnake at all, but a harmless gopher snake, so I reached down and grabbed the 5-foot snake. It was an asshole about the whole thing, striking at my face repeatedly and getting me on the forearm. I grabbed it closer to the head and wrestled it into control as I made my way back across the ledge to the bucket, where I got unwrapped him from my arm and body and put it in the bucket. I then realized I forgot to tell the kid that it wasn't a rattlesnake before doing that. I looked up and he looked like he was going to vomit/pass out, probably the palest I've ever seen a living person. He surely believed he was about to see him, and I now routinely forget to tell homeowners that it's just a gopher snake. I was at a college football game for MSU in Missouri. I was up in the nose bleeds after our marching band had played in the homecoming parade earlier that day. I left to go get concessions and started walking down the stairs. I tripped suddenly and began tumbling over and over, down, over stairs, across landings, flailing hopelessly for purchase on one of the handrails or an onlooker's appendage, but with no avail. It seemed to never end. I eventually reached the bottom, where the landing divided left and right to leave the mezzanine, which meant there was a bit of concrete and a handrail directly in front of me. I hit the handrail with my lower back, almost fully upside down, and still locked in the kinetic tour de force of my fall. I rocked over the handrail with my lumbar as my fulcrum, dropped the meter or so to the ground, and landed feet first in such a state of confusion that I just started walking as if nothing had happened. The whole section erupted in cheers, to the point it made people on the field look up at us. TLDR, I took an epic fall down a shit ton of stairs in front of thousands, landed on my feet, and everyone thought it was on purpose. I'm in San Diego with 2 girlfriends for the weekend. We are bar hopping and end up at this huge, noisy club. At this point we are all completely wasted. We see someone come on stage and say there will be a girls versus boys contest and they would pick 6 contestants. Of course, I'm the lucky one to get picked as one of the female contestants. The club is incredibly loud, so I can't really hear the instructions, but I get the gist. Each person must take a shot while wearing a boxing glove, with one hand behind their back. The team who finishes all 3 shots first wins. I then hear the audience gasping, but I didn't catch what the announcer said. So the game begins. The first 2 girls in front of me take their shots, as do the 2 boys. At this point, it's a dead heat. I'm up next, and the guy I'm up against is having a real hard time taking the shot, looking at it with disgust, not picking it up. I wonder what the fuck is wrong with him, since it's just a stupid tequila shot. So, I pick it up with my boxing glove and swig it with a smile on my face. The audience gasps again, and starts screaming and cheering. I won the contest, and free drinks for the night. Point afterward, people are coming up to shake my hand, and patting me on the back. After getting another drink I meet up with one of my friends. She says that was amazing. I can't believe you ate that worm. What? I frantically ask her what was in the shot. She looks at me with utter disbelief, and says there was a huge tequila worm at the bottom of the glass. Did you not see it? Apparently, I was too drunk to notice, and hadn't heard them say that there was a huge faking worm at the bottom of the last competitor's glass. I gagged and freaked out for a moment, but then settled into a nice fuck yeah, TLDR. Entered shot contest at a bar, drank a giant worm without knowing, got free drinks, and looked like a badass. This happened in my skydiving years. It was a Saturday morning. There was a group of girls from the nearby college wanting to jump. So the daring, including myself, wanted to do a hop and pop to show the girls what skydiving looks like. Point we get to altitude, jump, deploy our chutes, and start to show off our crazy canopy skills. I decide that I'll do a hook turn. They look cool from the ground and my canopy colors were blue and pink. Point well, after some tugs on my toggles, my hook turn collapses my canopy. It turns into a low hook turn. Low hook turns usually end up with a visit to the hospital or the morgue, usually the latter with my canopy folded over. I'm doing revolutions, my altitude is too low to cut away, and use my reserve, so I think to myself that this is it. I hope this doesn't hurt too bad. I hope I can walk away. On the bright side, my lines didn't wrap around the canopy, so there is a possibility that I can pull it out before impact. From the people on the ground, all they saw were some skydivers coming in for a landing, swinging like a pendulum, and some of them coming in to kick this inflatable target we had at RDZ. They could tell that something wasn't right with one of the divers, me, because his chute wasn't open, and he was spinning parallel to the ground. Point the most important thing to do in skydiving is to make everything you do look cool. Atheists, bear with me here. With 100 feet to go before impact, I pump my toggles, release, and my canopy unfurls and inflates as if the hands of God raked his fingers through my lines and pulled my canopy tight. This put my body position perpendicular with no inches to spare for a walk. In landing point the crowd applauds with oohs and ahs, including the experienced divers who knew what was happening. I bow, gather my stuff, and go in the clubhouse to calm my nerves. My buddies told the students, he does that all the time. And they knew I was shaken. Point I met my old dive buddies a few months ago. We live in different states now, and they brought up that experience as one of the craziest things they have ever seen. Oh, maybe junior year of high school, I used to stay after school to avoid going home. Some girl 1 year below me came up to me with her friends, acting flirty. Her girlfriend and 3 guys walked away. I did not think much of it at the time. Fast forward about 30 minutes, and the girl that I was talking to said that she was worried about her friend and why she was still gone. She said that her friend went in the auditorium and asked if I would see if she is still there. I walk into the auditorium and all the lights are off, except for the band pit. I make my way down there and hear a girl say no, let go. I flipped a bit and mustered up a yell while charging the band pit. 3 guys take off, followed by the girls. About a month later, my dean walks into my classroom and says that she needs to escort me to the principal's office. Mind you, my school was huge, so while walking to the other building where the principal's office was located, I asked if this was about my skipping gym class a bunch of times. She said no, but whatever it was about must be really big to warrant her escorting me to the principal. We get to the office and I see 2 cops and the 2 girls that I met a month before. Freaking the fuck out, I sit down and the cops say, "Thank you." What the fuck? I was asked some questions and was informed that the 3 guys were attempting to rap the girl. I guess I stumbled in at the right time. I had not spoken to my father for months at this time in my life, but received a call from him that night. The school called to tell him what I had done. My pops told me that I was his hero. That was a good day. Back in my college days, I used to have a couple of friends who used to fascinate me by their ability to flip a cigarette into their mouth. They would hold the cigarette out in front of them near their lap, or about waist height, and with a quick flick of their wrist, flip it right into their mouth. Usually it would take them a couple of tries, but they would usually end up doing it. Now, I tried a couple of times, but could never do it, and got frustrated with looking like an idiot while attempting it. So, I'm at this party, where I hardly know anyone. But thanks to the many substances going around, everyone is feeling good and pretty friendly. I end up walking into a room with about 7 people sitting on some couches talking. I don't know a single one, and naturally, when I walk and they all stop talking and look at me, I say nothing, sit down on an empty spot on the couch, pull a cigarette out of my pack, and flick it into my mouth on the first try. I quickly light it, while trying to look like I do it all the time, while they laugh in astonishment. In that moment, I was the coolest I have ever been in my life. It might not be exactly in tune with this thread, but I thought it was pretty badass. Here's another story. When I was in grade 10, I had this real asshole of a CS teacher. Like the type that would rather make fun or condescend you to make himself feel better or something instead of helping you. One day, we were making programs to output certain properties of a sphere/circle after inputting a radius value. I remember asking him what's the surface area of a sphere or something to that effect. I mean, I don't think it was an unreasonable question. I'm in faking 10th grade for fact's sake. He decided to take this opportunity to humiliate me. So anyway, this is how the convo went. Me, the surface area of a sphere is 4 pi r squared. Right, sir? CS teacher, did you just ask me the surface area of a sphere? Me, hesitates. Yay, CS teacher. Well, maybe we should call your maths teacher and find out. Walks over to phone, dials maths teacher. CS teacher, hey, your student X would like to ask you a question. I walk over to phone with everyone in class watching. Me, yay, Mr. C's teacher doesn't know the surface area of a sphere and he's too embarrassed to ask you himself. His face turned super red and the whole class cracked up. I felt so bad as that week. Having just gotten out of a particularly long lecture, I decided I needed a smoke. It was the dead of winter, so I was wearing a full-length navy coat, but I hadn't buttoned it up yet as I walked toward the door. Desperately, I searched the coat pockets for my smokes and my lighter. I found them in opposing pockets with each hand. Without breaking stride, I put a cigarette in my mouth, put the case away, and begin to raise the lighter to the cigarette. Realizing that both of my hands are still busy, I realize I can't effectively open the door. Call it poor planning. Time slowed and my mind raced to think of a solution. As the door loomed ahead of me, I realized that the only way I can continue out the door to smoke as soon as possible is to kick the door open. I lean back, raise my foot to mid-door level, kick, ignite the lighter, and pass swiftly through the door. I kick too hard though. The door swings widely and almost hits the side of the building. I'm still traveling through with the momentum from the kick. I bring the lighter down and pocket it. I exhaled smoke into the evening air and put my hand in the other coat pocket. A blast of cold winter air, peppered with small flakes of snow, blew my coat back majestically. It was then that time sped back up and I realized that everyone walking by the building had stopped and turned to look at me. I went to a private school, which was composed of really sheltered kids and a handful of troubled kids that had been kicked out of public school. I guess their parents thought our school was more disciplined, which I don't think it was. In the 7th grade I began taking taekwondo. The best parts about the class were the moves designed to break someone's hold. I was late for class one morning, and in the empty hall I ran into a bully named Wade, think Mo from Calvin and Hobbes, who started giving me some shit about something, though I can't remember what. I tried to just move past him and go to class, but he grabbed me by the shirt collar and shoved me against the lockers, continuing to yell at me. This was my chance. I snapped into action and broke his grasp with a move I had learned in taekwondo, but the move was supposed to end in me bending his arm back with my elbow so that the attacker would end up in a hold. Unfortunately my elbow missed its mark, so even though I broke his grasp and did kind of a fancy looking but botched move, it ended in me weakly holding just one of his wrists. I realized I blew it and didn't know what to do next, so I awaited my pummeling. Wade looked down at me holding his wrist, a result he had not anticipated. His facial expression changed, stamped off and said, "Gore, Nick, I was just joking." He didn't bother me again after that, except once to ask if I had done it with this girl I dated in the 5th grade. What a dope. I was 19 and at a house party near the university in my hometown. It was winter and my girlfriend and I were wearing scarves she had just knitted. They were her first knitting projects and she was super proud of them. I was super proud too. Anyway, there were a group of snarky jocks sitting on the steps and on the railing of the porch. We were returning from a beer run, and as I approached the door, one of the jocks on the railing says to me, "Nice scarf, fag," and all his buddies laugh. I stood there with the door in my hand for a second and looked at my visibly hurt girlfriend. It made me furious that he mocked her amazing creation and gift. So I slammed the door and started towards him to tell him how actually faking awesome my scarf was. He must have thought I was in fight mode because he flinched, lost balance, tried to correct himself, and comically fell backwards off the porch to the delight of both his and my friends. I opened the door for my beaming girlfriend and we went inside. Best part is no one knew all I was gonna do is get all sentimental on his ass and open up a can of polite confrontation all over him. TLDRR, guy talked smack on my woman's yarn crafts and now he's on his back. I was about 17 when I was walking with my younger brother and 2 of his friends. They were all about 12. A car full of people passes and yells at us and flips us off. I knew who it was, so I flipped them off and yelled, "Fuck you." Back at them point we continued along and cut through an empty parking lot enclosed by trees to take a shortcut to our destination. The car I flipped off comes flying into the parking lot, people screaming, tires squealing. My little brother and his friends are scared shitless. I walked over to the car laughing because of the way the younger kids with me were acting and was going to give my friends in the car a good laugh. When I get to the car I stick my head damn near in the driver's window, still laughing, and realize I had no idea who any of these people were. My laughing face turned to a morbid "I'm about to get my ass kicked" face, which the people in the car must have interpreted as maniacal laughter turning into a death stare. It scared the shit out of them, and I recall hearing passengers screaming at the driver to get the fuck out of there, "He's going to kill us." The car peeled away, and I walked back to rejoin my brother and his friends, and they all thought I was the coolest, most badass older teen they'd ever meet. Late one summer evening at a nightclub in Atlantic City, New Jersey, I made one of those "I instantly regret this decision" comments. A couple of single friends were ogling the eye candy on the dance floor when I said, "You are all single because you don't have the balls to go and talk to them." Regret hadn't fully set in before the sharks smelled blood and began to circle. "Why don't you show us how it's done, hotshot?" they all sneered. Now, some quick calculations told me that it's better to take my chances with the foxes than to stay there and get eaten by the wolves. Don't you know mixed metaphors are the new black? So without hesitation, I swaggered my way towards one of the sexiest women I have ever seen in my life. Well, outside of a JPG, of course. Anyway, I'm just about to say hi when my feet took it upon themselves to save my dignity and walk me right up to the bar. Sure enough, the wolves started howling from across the club, and to put off the inevitable torture, I ignored the flack and ordered up a drink. Point reader, you should know that I'm not a bad looking guy, but I certainly should spend a few more hours in the gym and lay off the beer a bit. So what was to happen next was beyond my wildest expectations. With my drink in one hand and my pride on the line, I turned around to take a chance at redeeming myself, and this beautiful woman is walking right towards me with her friends all around. Instantly, I gulped down about half a glass of liquid courage on the rocks and cleared my throat. "Oh no, I was just about to come dance with you," I said. "Hey, I didn't have time to come up with something clever." She looked at me, and with a surprised look she says, "Great, I'll come find you after I get a drink." At that moment, you could have seen my ego from space. Honestly, I'll admit it, I was singing "Oh Yeah" by Yellow in my head. Anyone who knows their stuff about acting cool will tell you, when you do something cool, act like you're not excited. Act like you do it all the time and you are practically bored with it. This is what cool people do, and so should you. Point seeing me walk away from her. My friends thought I was shot down, and the look on my face must have confirmed it in their minds. They hooted and hollered as I made what seemed to be a walk of shame all the way back to my crew point. When I got so close I couldn't pretend not to hear them anymore, I put this puzzled look on my face so convincing you would have thought they were speaking Swahili. FYI, I don't speak Swahili. What's up? I said soberly. Got shot down, huh? Someone asked. Why would you say that? I replied, trying to buy myself some time to build the suspense or to delay the inevitable. If she just blew me off. We bickered back and forth. I kept avoiding the answers, and they kept putting in their jabs at my expense. But then it happened. Her brown eyes alone would make you beg for more. And the dress she wore that night was like a sunset red, with an open back that dropped down to her slender waist, exposing her perfectly tan skin, enough to make your mouth water. The guys I was with backed away startled when she approached, like she was dangerous to touch. Cool and confident I asked if she was ready and she smiled. Let's go. Point I've never felt so bad as in all my life, and I doubt I ever will again. Point TLDR. I picked up a woman who was super hot, even though I chickened out on my first attempt. Well, when I was in high school, I had a crappy little 12/13-year-old, at the time, Honda Civic. I used to treat this car like crap. I would take corners at 40 miles per hour. I would skid around bends like there was no tomorrow. I had a lead foot. I liked to weave in traffic basically. For a time, I was that asshole on the road. Point anyway. One of the things my friends and I loved to do was something we called tray surfing, where you would stick two of those fast food plastic trays under the rear wheels of a front wheel drive car, pull up the handbrake, and drive in as tight a circle as you can, as fast as you can. Naturally, the lower friction of the plastic trays causes the car to spin like crazy, and it's fun. So one night, we are doing that on the top of a parking structure. When we decide it's time to leave, I start speeding down the structure, skidding around the corners, making a lot of noise, and being an immature douchebag. At one bend, I get cocky, and I decide to pull a handbrake turn. This is, of course, something I've done countless times, and no doubt I'll be able to pull it off again, right? Well, as soon as I pull the handbrake, I realize something's wrong. First off, I pulled it too early. Secondly, I didn't turn the wheel enough. Time slows down, and I realize it's too late to disengage the handbrake. When the car turns 45 degrees toward a concrete wall, my car is still traveling in the same direction, though, so I turn the wheel toward my momentum. The car keeps sliding in the same direction, and finally I clear the wall, but now the car has spun more, beyond the point where I can keep the wheels pointed in the direction I'm moving. I spin the wheels the other way, so that they're lined up again, just backwards, and I must have been off a bit, because the car starts to change direction toward the end of the wall, swinging around again. Finally, I disengage the handbrake and slam on the foot brake, heading straight for a concrete pillar. I'm so sure I've hit the wall, because the car stops so suddenly. I ask one of my friends to pop out and check out the damage, because I can't look. He starts cracking up and holds up 2 fingers to show how close I was. I get out and can't believe my eyes. The car is, quite literally, about a quarter inch from the wall. Wheel broke down laughing like crazy. Anyway, that was long, so TLDR, almost hit a wall, because I was an idiot. Pulled a save out of my ass due to ninja driving skills. Last May I was in Vegas with my buddies and we decided to go to a strip club, since I had never been before. We get to the club, Spearmint Rhino, find a nice long couch in the back, and order some beers with shots. The first girl to come up to me is a solid 7 and clearly wasted. She's slurring her speech, and is reduced to leaning against the wall next to me for support. I decided I don't want stripper vomit on my shirt, and tell her no thanks, and that I think we were about to order some cigars before we got started. She says, really? I don't think your friends are waiting. I look to my right and there is my friend Brad, a soft-spoken, humble Japanese man leaning back on the couch getting slammed in the face with a stripper's super glittery disco ball TW. I turned back to drunk stripper and told her no thanks again. A few minutes go by and this gorgeous black stripper comes up to me and sits on my lap and says, "Hey handsome, do you like chocolate?" I looked right into her eyes and quipped, "Baby, call me Willy Wonka." Then we laughed and actually got into a conversation that didn't involve sex. After that we did order some cigars and I told her to come back later, but she never did. When I was a kid in elementary school, there was a bully on the bus who would give shit to all of us. He'd call us names, tell us he could beat us up etc. Coincidentally he lived in my neighborhood, except a different stop than mine. I really don't like seeing people or animals that can't defend themselves get abused, and I will always try and step in if given the chance. So one day I told him that he should get off at my stop so I can make him put his money where his mouth was. He gets off at my stop along with my friend, who was one of the major victims of his bullying. The fight starts with lots of name calling, and he starts charging at me after I called him something ridiculous out of movie I'm sure. Being the Ninja Turtle and Karate Kid fan that I was, and still am today, I decided to open up with a flurry of roundhouse kicks. Well, about the third roundhouse kick in, I connect my heel to his dome, and he gets obliterated to the ground and runs home crying with a bloody nose. The next day his dad comes on the bus saying all these lies about how I beat his kid up, and I'm a bully. Well, I was friends with the bus driver and he gave the kid's father the whole story about how I was standing up for everyone on the bus, and how his kid is the real bully. I was a hero to my bus and the bully was a quiet little bitch from then on.